Just
And we are live. Hello, Garland Nixon. It's Saturday morning, and I'm here with my two good friends, Alexander Mercouris and Ray Mcgovern. Gentlemen, welcome to my humble channel.
delighted to be here, Garland.
And the smoking gun is out in the Russiagate. Many of us feel vindicated, and I'm sure you two gentlemen are not pleased with the outcomes, but you certainly understand that. Let's talk. So let's start with an introduction of my two fine guests, both of whom I know both online and personally. I met Alexander. I was fortunate enough to meet Alexander and his lovely wife in London at a Julian Assange event. Alexander, also known as the Oracle of London, is an international security analyst and the editor-in-chief at theduran.com and the host of The Duran on YouTube and Alexander Mercouris channel. Also, you can find him. He has a great channel on locals and lots of other places. Alexander, welcome.
Thank you very much, Garland. As I say, a joy to be with you on this program, and delighted to be here.
Ray Mcgovern, he's a former CIA analyst. He's the co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. He served as a CIA analyst for 27 years, from the administrations of John F. Kennedy to that of George H.W. Bush. Ray's duties included chairing national intelligence estimates and preparing the president's daily brief, which he briefed one-on-one to President Ronald Reagan's 5 most senior national security advisors from 1981 to 1985. Ray has all kinds of degrees and from fine universities and vine-covered places that I probably wouldn't be even allowed on the likes of me wouldn't even be allowed on the campus. Ray Mcgovern, welcome. All right. All right. Let's start here. This, to me, is the smoking of all smoking guns standing over the body. We have learned that since March 2012, the FBI approved and facilitated a secure work environment at Perkins Coie's Washington, D.C. office, which continues to be operational. This letter was dated May 21st, 2022, May 25th, 2022. The law firm confirmed and acknowledges the arrangement. That's in a letter from Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan, Republican representatives. So now the plot thickens. The arguments that the FBI somehow didn't know that Michael Sussman was working for the Clintons, that they didn't know anything. They were literally in the office with the Clinton team. Let's start with you, Ray Mcgovern. Your thoughts on this?
Well, actually, this has been not Russiagate, but it's been FBI Gate. It's the revelation of those exchanges between Peter Strzok and his lover, both of them high officials of the FBI. Bob Perry was alive then. He wrote it up. He said, "This is the FBI sort of arranging things." Now we know for sure the FBI actually had a little, we used to call it SCIF, a little secure unit right there in Perkins Coie. So is this unprecedented? It is not unprecedented. There are SCIFs in other places like Booz Allen or SAIC. You know, if you're doing classified work for the government, often the FBI or someone else will come in and build this kind of secure environment. Oh, wait a second. I just said, if you're doing work for the government, I thought Perkins Coie was doing work for the Democrats. I guess they were doing work for the Democrats and the government. It's a smoking gun in the sense that it shows if I was in bed with Perkins Coie, that they were not ignorant about what was going on. As a matter of fact, they were a main player. And of course, when you say smoking gun, I think the most smoking of the smoking guns came out at this same trial where Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, had to admit under oath that she approved all this stuff. And what she approved is a farce, a manufacturing of evidence that most people can't understand, technical evidence that would show that Trump's folks were in direct contact with, you guessed it, the Russians. Well, with Alpha Bank, Russian bank, okay? Now, how did they get this information? They made it up. They made it up just like they made up the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Same guys, never held accountable for the former, okay? And so they made this stuff up, and then the technical people who were asked to try to put this all together so it would be somewhat persuasive. Oh my God, this will never be close scrutiny. I mean, they're gonna, as soon as somebody looks at this, they're gonna say, "Oh my God, crazy." And the question was, of course, how soon will they look at it? It's only 3-4 weeks before the election. I mean, let's put it out. And Hillary said, "Go with it." And then she herself pens a saying, "Well, look what we've discovered here in Russia. This is probably the best evidence." And so does Jake Sullivan, her advisor. So they're caught red-handed. Now the question is, what will the media do with that? Well, so far, it has not been an impressive performance by the New York Times. Surprised. But eventually, as these trials go on and as more is revealed, if John Durham, the special prosecutor, is given his head, is allowed to do his job, then we'll learn more. I suspect that he'll be reined in, and that would be a disaster, but there's ample precedent for that, even with respect directly to John Durham. So we'll just have to see about that.
Alexander, let me add this. Not only was there an FBI office in Perkins Coie law firm, we also know that Michael Sussman had access to the FBI office in Perkins Coie. My argument all along with every one of the investigations that I saw, from the Horowitz investigation, which was the original investigation inside the FBI, to the Mueller investigation, to the John Durham investigation, every single time my argument was this was an operation that involved the FBI, and those investigations were nothing but cover-ups. I feel like this is a further evidence of this. But let's get your thoughts on this. The smoking gun. Is this the smoking gun? What does this all mean, Alexander?
I think it sets the scene where we're going to find not just one smoking gun, but a whole arsenal of them, if I can say, because I mean this is huge. Now, can I just make one observation, which is about the Sussman trial, because of course there's been some criticism of the jury there's been some criticism of the court process, but I think listening to what came out of that trial and what some of the jurors have said, I mean, what they were basically saying was this can't have been a big deal, because this man Sussman is being prosecuted for lying to the FBI, but who in the FBI can have believed that lie? I mean, James Baker, I think his name is James Baker, the chief counsel at the FBI, doesn't know when he meets Sussman that Sussman is actually working for Hillary Clinton. And this is some kind of, I mean, it's ludicrous. It is completely absurd. And again, I mean, not somebody who's actually ever had to work much with juries, but I've had some experience, and I do know that juries generally don't like to be put through such nonsense, and in this case it was nonsense. But having said that, having acknowledged the fact that the FBI must have known, definitely knew, unquestionably knew who Sussman was, and he turns up and he says to them, I'm not acting for anybody, and they know exactly whom he's acting for. At the end of the day, we now discover so much more, and it is terrible. This is beyond awful. because what we now have is something which is extremely sinister. And, we need to be clear about how sinister it is. It is that the nation's major police agency, and by the way, its counterintelligence agency, are working with, in bed with, a political faction within the United States. I don't say the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is a very big thing. I mean, there's people like Bernie Sanders in it. There's, people like, Ocasio-Cortez. But a political faction within that party and its law firm and the FBI are all in cahoots with each other. Now, I hate to bring up my own childhood experiences, but of course I lived in Greece in the run up to a military coup there. And I remember the time of the military coup. I was a child then. And of course I was in exile. That was exactly the kind of scenario we had in Greece. Now, I'm not saying we're anywhere close to the kind of situation in the United States that we had in Greece in the 1960s. But in a democratic society, you have fail-safes. You keep things separated from each other. When things that are separated are coming together, or should be separated, are coming together, the alarm bells should ring. And coming back to the point that Ray made, the fact that the media in the United States seems to be intensely relaxed about this revelation is utter folly on their part and very disturbing for everyone else.
Ray, Alexander brings up an important point. You would be in error if you said this was just the Democratic Party. One of the people who was instrumental in the dissemination of the Steele dossier was John McCain. What we find out now, I would make an argument that the neocons, the foreign policy blob, is the machine. Now, it so happens that that blob has a bigger footprint in the Democratic Party currently. But in that, John McCain's and the Lindsey Graham's and the Warhawks were instrumental in the dissemination of the Steele dossier, and that they have been conspicuously quiet about all of the things coming out. I mean, well, John McCain has passed away, but Lindsey Graham and the Republican Warhawks, many have been conspicuously quiet. What are your thoughts on who's behind this thing, and further comments? Ray Mcgovern.
Well, on the Democratic Party, you can distinguish between those of us who used to be FDR people who thought that the Democratic Party would defend the common man, common woman, and those who are just sort of functionaries. Now, in the Democratic National Committee, of course, you have the functionaries. And the ones that are working for Hillary Clinton are intimidated by Hillary for some reason that's beyond me. And that's the faction that you have. And, James Comey, the head of the FBI, he has escaped so far. Why? Because precisely what Alexander just talked about, the division of power, the fact that there should be a line between these institutions has sort of evaporated. You have Comey testifying, or Comey writing a book, actually. This is the most important thing in my view. I keep coming back to this. He wrote this book after he fell under something of a cloud, not in the media, but with those of us who knew what was going on. And he said, look, please understand, quote, I was operating in an environment in which we were sure Hillary Clinton would be the next president of the United States, period, end quote. Now, why does that matter? Matters a hell of a lot. You can take all kinds of liberties with the law. You can mount a preemptive coup. You can do whatever you like if you're sure that the next president is going to give you plaudits rather than prison, right? So that, I don't know why he said that, but he admitted a major factor here. So that's what they did. They knew they had carte blanche to do whatever they wanted, because when Hillary came in, far from prosecuting them, she was going to praise them. So this Sussman thing shows chapter and verse about how James Baker, mentioned by Alexander just now, the chief counsel for the FBI, had to know that Sussman was working for Hillary. So Sussman writes him a little email the day before he comes to see him. He says, "No, I'm not working for anybody." So, okay. And so he goes in there and he says, "No, I'm not working for anybody." And James Baker says, "Oh, good. That's interesting." And then he goes on, whatever. He proceeds. So only later, and that's the beauty of this John Durham special prosecutor investigation. Only later does that revelation come up that the Sussman told Baker he was not working for anybody. That's obviously a lie on Sussman's part, and it was a lie on Baker's part by accepting the lie. All right. Later, the email comes up. Email saying in black and white, "I'm not working for anybody," says Sussman. And the judge asks James Baker at trial, "How come you sat on that email? How come you didn't give us that email when you should have?" And he says, "I'm not doing this investigation. And besides, he's a friend of mine." I mean, yeah, sort of the Godfather. "He's a friend of mine, all right? I'm not going to give you any help." And so the whole thing is very corrupt. Now, whether John Durham is going to be able to take this farther really depends on a lot of things. Depends on, I think, the midterms, how they go. Depends on how the Attorney General, whether he's got any spine to him or not, whether he'll give Durham his charter and his rights to do this. So we'll have to see. But I'm very pessimistic because, as Alexander pointed out, the media is part of this cabal. In other words, the whole idea was to get this in the media, and we know who the media people who regurgitate what the CIA, the FBI tells them to regurgitate. We know that Sussman was involved early on in Steele, in the Steele dossier, okay? And we know that people like, who's the guy that runs Yahoo News now?
Korn?
What's that?
Was it Korn or Ignatius?
No, Yahoo News, Isikoff.
Isikoff, yeah.
Isikoff, yeah.
So he played a major role in the dossier, and now he's some sort of hero for revealing a couple of secrets about WikiLeaks that really don't have any effect. So unless there's sort of like a come to Jesus movement, a real conversion on the part of these, what do you call them? I won't use an adjective because I may get shut off, but there are a lot of adjectives that come immediately to mind. And the most prominent one is the one I get out of the Bronx where I grew up, and that this whole thing was a crock. Okay. Now, the fact that Trump said it was a hoax, that's what you say in Manhattan. Okay.
Right.
In the Bronx, we say it was a hack, pure and simple. And the fact that Trump said something that I agree with, that automatically puts me not only in Putin's pocket, but in Trump's pocket. Welcome to America.
And now here's further evidence. Basically, on behalf of Sussman, to be quite honest, I mean, there's no way the FBI didn't know that Sussman was Michael Sussman was working for the Clinton campaign, because here's more evidence. Trial documents. Sussman edited FBI press release about the DNC hack because it, quote, undermined the DNC's narrative. This is at the Federalist. We go. There were emails passed back and forth. Let me read one of them. Michael, they're on a first name basis. Our press office is once again getting a ton of calls on the DCCC matter. A draft response is provided below. Wanted to get your thoughts on this prior to sending it out. That's from the FBI to Michael Sussman. In his reply, Sussman asked the FBI to change the first line of the press release to reflect the DNC's messaging on the hack. He explained that he preferred a more definitive statement that made clear the FBI is aware of the cyber intrusion involving the DNC that has been reported in the media. The draft you sent says only the FBI is aware of media reports. It does not say that the FBI is aware of the intrusion that the DCCC reported. Indeed, it refers only to a possible cyber intrusion, and in that way undermines what the DCCC said in its statement, or at least calls into question what the DCCC said. The FBI acquiesced with some protestation, I might argue, but they acquiesced and they went along with changing their press release to support the Democratic Party's narrative. Alexander Mercouris.
Well, I mean, it is astonishing again. I mean, we have the Clinton campaign, because that's ultimately who Sussman is representing. They're coming along and they're dictating press releases by the FBI. It also shows, and now I don't practice maybe completely different in the United States from what it is in Britain, but it also seems to show an extraordinary degree of knowledge, a depth of knowledge of the FBI investigation, if that's what it is, if there even was a proper FBI investigation. So we see here, in the middle of an election, the Hillary Clinton campaign, through its law firm, shaping the narrative, the public narrative about the conduct of what in Britain we would call a police investigation, in a way that both has an effect on the election and which could be politically damaging to Hillary Clinton's political opponent. And note that the initiative for this whole exchange comes from the police agency. They are contacting the lawyer and they're saying, this is our draft. Are you happy? Is there something you want us to change? Because, it may not quite rise up to your needs and expectations. I mean, I cannot even imagine such a thing. I wouldn't have been able to imagine such a thing. And again, what it basically shows is the FBI and the Clinton faction, or the faction to which Hillary Clinton belongs for, and which Perkins Coie are working for, all working in tandem with each other. Now, we've said a great deal about the FBI. I do want to just make one observation, which is that I have serious personal issues with a law firm that conducts itself in this fashion. I mean, again, I find it staggering that a law firm is involving itself in this way. And once upon a time, I would have thought that this would be letting off alarm bells within the law firm itself. But again, it may be that things are done differently in other places. And nobody seems to be bothered about this at all, even though I have to say I find it shocking. It may not be as shocking as what the FBI is doing, but I talked about barriers, that there are things which you don't cross. The FBI is crossing them in a huge way, but the law firm that is involved, I have to pick my words very carefully here, by the way. The law firm is assisting the FBI to cross those barriers, which, as lawyers, they ought to know perfectly well the FBI ought not to be doing.
Ray, let me add something too, something that I know you're well aware of, that I think has to be taken. It gives us a unique context. We also learned, many people who haven't been following the Russiagate operation, as it were, closely, don't know this, and that is during the summer of that year, we now know that John Brennan, who was heading the CIA, briefed Barack Obama and others. It seems that maybe James Comey was in there, maybe even Joe Biden was in there, but he briefed Barack Obama that, as I understand it, the CIA had information that the Russians believed that Hillary Clinton was going to attempt to cook up a story to tie Donald Trump to the Russians in order to cover her email scandal. That John Brennan briefed the president that Hillary Clinton was going to cook up the Russiagate scandal. And that was referred to the FBI for investigation. It appears that rather than investigate Hillary Clinton being up to, shall we say, miscreant behavior, the FBI decided to join in. Your thoughts on how that affects this, and any other comments? Ray Mcgovern.
Oh, well, thanks, Garland. That's a really good segue from what Alexander has been saying. There needs to be barriers, right? There need to be barriers between not only political parties and organs of government, but there used to be three parts of our government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Now they're all kind of melded together. And this is a case in point. What happened was during all this, during the summer, just at about the time of the Democratic National Convention at the end of July 2016, Hillary told her folks, "Well, look, you know, we need to blame the Russians for this hack, in quotes, of information from the DNC, because that information is so prejudicial to our cause." I mean, as you know, folks, she looked around the table and said, "You know, it shows that we kind of stole the nomination for Bernie Sanders. So we got to deflect attention from that. And the best idea we've come up with is to blame it on the Russians. That way, John McCain and the others will say, 'My God, this is an act of war. Why did the Russians do this? Why did the Russians do this?' And nobody will read the emails. Nobody will read how we stacked the primaries and nobody will read that. So this all happened. The 26th of July was when she was alleged to have made this decision. Curiously enough, our friend, or my non-friend, David Sanger of the New York Times, had a major piece that same day, okay, talking about the Russian hack, the Russian hack, the Russian hack. Okay. What else happened that day? Well, there was a Russian report, an analytic report that somehow or other the CIA got a hold of, and the Russians reported just what you said, Gordon, that the Hillary Clinton was going to cook up this Russiagate thing. Now, here's the view that I can help with from my experience. When something like that leaks to the press, which it was, which happened eventually, one has to file a crimes report. Okay, it's the law. You have to file a crimes report saying somebody leaked this information about what the Russians think of Hillary Clinton. What you do is you file that with the Justice Department, FBI being its executive agent. Okay, so what happened? Well, John Brennan felt it necessary not only to file the crimes report, but to brief Barack Obama. Now, I happen to believe the president was in on all this. So it would be tongue-in-cheek for Brennan to be going to Obama. Hey, guess what? The Russians know what Hillary's doing. Somebody leaked that, so I have to go through the motions, Mr. President. I'm briefing you on that, okay? And go by Bob with my leg. That's good. That's good enough, John. You can go. And then he goes to Comey and he says, "Hey, guess what? We have to file a crimes report." So we go through the motions, and Comey says, "Oh, the Russians know about this too." Okay. And what happens? We go back to this division. There's only way to keep people honest. The Congress, in the person of Grassley, Senator Grassley of Iowa, who is 90 years old now, I think, and who has been overseeing meaning overlooking the behavior of the FBI for, I think it's 150 years. It's a lot of time, okay? So he asks Comey at an interview that's staged, he says, Mr. Comey, do you remember being briefed on that report from the Russians? And Comey says, doesn't ring a bell. And Grassley goes on to the next question. Now, Grassley allowed himself to write a tweet, a Grassley tweet, a 90-year-old tweet, which said, when it turned out that the lawyer who falsified the application for a surveillance warrant from the FISA process, when that fellow got off with, I think, having to stay home one Saturday evening or something like that, he didn't have it in jail, okay? Grassley wrote in this tweet, he says, that's the way it goes with the Department of Just Us. They always come up for themselves. That's the way it goes with the Department of Just Us. Now, that would be funny, right? But it's not funny at all. Because Grassley's job is to make sure that doesn't happen with the Department of Just Us. And if you have to say just us, you have to include Grassley. Comey, doesn't ring a bell. Grassley, next question. Come on. So that's how corrupt it is. And that's how fearful. Even, I think Grassley is basically an honest man. But he can't. He's up against it. And he knows what he's up against. And I've never seen it quite this bad. You know, watch movies, and you could always depend on the feds coming in at the end and doing the right thing, right? You could always depend on what the Russians call the organs of state security doing the right thing. Not anymore. Now it's a case of they're all in on it, and you and I, and less so Alexander, are running the risk of people knocking at our door tomorrow and saying, well, how can you say that about our органы государственной безопасности, our organs of state security? That's what it's come down to. It's just as bad as it was in the Soviet Union when I was watching it very closely, when I was there, actually, a couple of decades ago.
A couple of things to move to our next subject. You know, I worked with my law enforcement background as a law enforcement official in the state of Maryland, working for the governor's office. I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force for a year. I can't reveal a lot, but I have been to the Hoover building on more than one occasions and went to regular meetings at the FBI office in Baltimore. And here's what I can tell you: everybody in the room had postgraduate degrees. These people were not stupid. They were not ignorant. These were very well-educated, knowledgeable people. Much of the Russiagate operation requires us to believe that the FBI people, the FBI investigators were the stupidest people in the world. That the Steele dossier, which came in, which is absurd and implausible on its face for a person coming out of a cadet coming out of the academy, certainly wouldn't have fooled an FBI trained investigator. Let me read this. Kevin Brock, the FBI's former intelligence chief, said that one revelation from the Sussman trial that needs further explanation is the fact that Sussman's Alpha Bank allegations and several of Steele dossier memos were delivered to the FBI on the exact same day. Sounds like coordination. So that's why if you look at this thing now, there's one small central group. There is the Fusion GPS working with Sussman, Perkins Coie, the FBI. The same names come together with the Steele dossier. Your thoughts on how all of this fits in including the Steele dossier, Alexander Mercouris?
Well, absolutely. Well, can I just say, I mean, I remember when the Steele dossier was published. Now, I do not have the depth of knowledge of Russia and of Russian politics and Russian governmental systems that Ray has, and I obviously haven't been an investigator like you have been, but I looked at this thing and I said, this is a complete load of nonsense. And I cannot believe that anybody with a law enforcement background or an intelligence, counterintelligence background, and the FBI is, of course, a counterintelligence organization as well as a police organization, can have taken this thing seriously. I mean, it beggars belief that they did, and yet they appeared to. They went through the motions of it. They investigated it, and of course, going through a process of investigation and publicizing the fact, because, James Comey comes along to Congress. He tells people, I'm actually conducting this investigation. He's actually confirms in public that this investigation is underway. The mere fact of conducting an investigation is massively damaging to the reputation, to somebody's reputation. And of course, when you are conducting an investigation looking for collusion, or allegedly investigating possible collusion with a foreign power, a hostile foreign power, well, of course, that it compounds the damage, the reputational damage, a myriad fold. And again, I cannot believe that the FBI didn't know this. And of course, we know that the FBI knew lots of things. I mean, they can't have believed Steele. They knew that Steele was talking to the media. They cancelled him as a source, and yet almost immediately a sort of back channel was arranged so that they could continue, in effect, to communicate with him. They got all of these interviews with people like Danchenko and the rest. They discovered that Danchenko is a completely non-credible source. They know by the early part of 2017 that this whole thing is, I mean, it's sort of just impossible, but ridiculous. And we have James Comey, the man who can't remember important conversations that he's told about the fact that Hillary Clinton has given orders to set up Russiagate. He can't remember that, but of course he can remember very well all his conversations with Donald Trump. He goes away and he writes them all up afterwards, and we're asked to believe that this is, a precise and accurate record of what Donald Trump says. So his memory, let's say, can be a bit selective sometimes. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's not so good. So James Comey, he's pressing on. He's campaigning, even after he's been sacked from the FBI, to get special counsel appointed to something which already by this time the FBI knew perfectly well that it didn't add up, and it didn't make any kind of sense, because the people they were speaking to, the actual sources, people like Danchenko, were just incredible. So this is, well, it's not a hoax. I think we should put this word aside. I'm sorry to use this, but I'd say this is a plot. I mean, this is a much more coordinated and sinister thing. You said a small group of people. You're absolutely right. And it's a plot. It's a plot. Maybe they weren't expecting to ever get convictions, because, for convictions, you need evidence. And chances of ever getting any real evidence together doesn't exist. But the mere fact that an investigation is underway is going to do incalculable damage. And it has done. Now, it's done massive damage to Donald Trump and his presidency. Perhaps there are many people who are not too sorry about Donald Trump. Okay, you have your feelings about Donald Trump. I understand that. But it's done massive damage to the public discussion, the way debate is conducted in the United States. And of course, you can't have debate. You can't have a functioning democracy without debate. And of course, it highlighted and deepened the corruption in America's institutions, because this shouldn't happen. It did happen. Even Donald Trump, however much you may dislike him, is entitled to the protections that exist in democracies and under the law. And it didn't happen. And of course, it was done in a way that was intended to benefit one particular political faction. And of course, it's done a huge amount of damage to the whole structure of democracy in the United States, and highlights the damage that had already done and which was already pre-existing, because you have to have an already weakened system for this sort of thing to happen at all.
And putting on my my professional hat, I would label this a RICO conspiracy. RICO is racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization, and that allows that if you charge someone with a crime, you can add a RICO charge, and that's like an additional 20 years. I got to add something, and I'll go right to Ray. You reminded me of something when you talked about the Steele dossier. The FBI determined that Steele was no longer a valid source, whatever the case may be. And they said, we're not going to talk to him anymore. But again, we have an incestuous relationship. One of the Department of Justice investigators was named Bruce Orr. His wife's name was Nellie Orr, and she was working for Fusion GPS, working on the Steele dossier. And we also know, let me add one other name, Charles Dolan. One of the people, when the FBI looked into the sources of the Steele dossier, one of the guys that came up was Charles Chuck Dolan. He was one of the sources for the Steele dossier. He was a former a person who ran the Clinton campaign in Virginia. Ray, this thing just gets uglier. The Steele dossier, Ray Mcgovern.
Well, I just want to take off on some of the things that Alexander said. Again, it's mind-boggling to believe about this plot. Plot is the right word, Alexander. Thank you. That's much better than crock. I've been around, I can say that I've been actively involved in political things, mostly foreign affairs, for 6 decades. Okay, I've never seen anything like this. Now, you go back more than 6 decades, maybe some sort of conspiracy, some sort of plot was equally noxious to overthrow a president. But I don't know about that. Maybe it's my lack of history of that period. But this was a plot, and this was to prevent a person from becoming president, a person that most people hated, a person who indeed had threatened to abolish or to restrict the FBI, forgot the FBI, or the CIA. I mean, he was a dangerous guy. God, nobody knew what was going to happen if Trump won. And so they did, before the election, a bunch of operations, the Alpha Bank Rus plot, stupid stuff that could be disproved, but not right away, right? You put this guy under a cloud. If it's not revealed until after the election, well, he might lose. Well, the grim irony is, I mean, whether you want Trump or not, he won despite all this stuff. And then these same fellows were faced with a big decision. My God, how much did you put in your computer? We got to cover this damn thing up. We got to make sure he's really afraid of us. How do we do that? The 5th of January, 2017, Obama, Biden, Comey, Brennan in the White House. Okay, Mr. President, we're going to go through with this. We're going to go through with this Russian hacking story. Matter of fact, we embedded that in this assessment from Brennan, and we're going to give that to Trump, and we're going to give that to him tomorrow. Oh, okay. And we're not only going to do that, but we're going to say, now, Mr. President-elect, here's the assessment by the entire intelligence community that says, in effect, that Russia helped you win the election. And besides that, James Comey says to the president, President Obama, I'm going to ask my fellow sleuths to leave, and I'll say, now, Mr. President-elect, I have something very sensitive to share with you. I'm going to ask my colleagues to leave. So they leave. Now, I don't know how to say this, Mr. Trump, but we have this dossier, and it reveals reportedly that you cavorted with prostitutes in Moscow and did other things. And Trump said, what? Yeah, well, it's just so you know, Mr. President. Oh, by the way, it's going to hit the press probably tomorrow. I want to make sure so you're not blindsided. We have this dossier, and Trump says, "Well, this is I didn't cavort." Trump doesn't get it right away. He's not been in Washington. He's been a real estate guy in New York, for God's sake. I mean, this is typical J. Edgar Hoover tactics. We have dossier, so you better be careful, Mr. Trump. It's actually going to hit the press tomorrow. Now, it didn't matter if it was full of holes. They wanted to make him powerless from the start. And they succeeded in doing that pretty much. Okay. Dossier was not rebutted for a lot of time later. And meanwhile, whatever attempts that Trump had to reach out to create a more decent relationship with Russia, boom, that's not going to go anywhere. So the military-industrial complex was very much involved in this. You can't build arms, sell arms, profiteer, put money in Congress people's pockets and appropriate more money for new arms. I mean, hello, that's the way it works. You can't do that if you don't have a good enemy, a powerful enemy, and that was Russia. So all these things came together. And the last thing I'll say has to do with what Obama said when they told him about, we're going to use the hack. It's in this report. And he said, now, how do we know how that hack got to WikiLeaks? Well, we assess. Look, I know you guys assess a lot of stuff. How do you know that hack got to WikiLeaks? We said, don't tell me you assess. Do you know? No, we don't know. So 2 days before he leaves office, Obama says, with respect to the Russian hacking, we have to confess that we don't know how it got to WikiLeaks. Hello? All right. Well, we don't know because there wasn't a hack. There was a leak. Somebody put a thumb drive or some other external storage device to one of those servers or computers at the DNC, extracted that information, put it in their pocket, took a plane across the ocean to wherever in Europe WikiLeaks put this out. That's what happened. And now there's no doubt about that because the head of forensic, the head of the CrowdStrike outfit that James Comey, for whatever reason, deferred to look into the forensics of the DNC hack, reported, now get this, he reported on December 5th, 2017, under oath to the House Intelligence Committee that there is no physical evidence that anyone hacked those DNC emails, not Russia, not anyone. We have no physical evidence it was hacked. Whoa! Did Comey know that? The head of CrowdStrike, George Henry, worked for Comey for 11 years as a supreme techie. Okay. Did he lose Comey's telephone number in his Rolodex? Hello? Did Comey not know that when he went on with this whole thing? And I'll just say this. I couldn't figure out why Comey kept going. And that's because I don't focus enough on domestic politics. It was clear. It was very clear that if Comey kept this thing going through the midterm elections in 2017, the Democrats would win big. Okay, you keep a cloud over Trump, but as Heather has said, you have him investigated by the not only the FBI but by the sainted Robert Mueller. Okay, who's in on all this? I'm convinced. You really impede his ability to act as president. Now, I have to say, because my wife always puts this in my ear, that I don't think Trump was a good president. I will not say what I usually say, namely, I will say it. I think he was the worst president we ever had, okay? But that doesn't mean that he was wrong whenever he said anything. Even a broken clock that's wrong most of the time is right. I think it's twice a day, right? Okay? Right on this. And the important thing is that this was a coup. And it succeeded in emasculating him once he became president. Ironically, it didn't succeed in preventing him from becoming president.
No.
Thank you very much, Ray. And I do know, do you have to go now? It's about 10 o'clock.
Here we go.
Thank you very much. That's Ray Mcgovern. We've got a few more minutes, 10 more minutes with Alexander Mercouris, but thanks a lot, Ray. I certainly appreciate you taking your time out. Alexander, we've got a couple more minutes. One of the things I'd like to ask you about, you know, being a man who I was very concerned about the quality of my work when I was a professional law enforcement official. The striking thing I see, and it, to me, when I look at the Biden administration and the level of incomprehensible incompetence there, this points to that with these people. When I look at the Steele dossier and read it, I think to myself, and a child could produce better work. When I look at if I were involved in that corrupt conspiracy, and someone handed it to you and said, okay, we're out to get Trump, Garland. Here, what do you think? I would ball it up in the trash and throw it at whoever handed it to me and say, don't you ever bring me anything like this again. Do you think I'm going to hand this to the FBI? We'll all be in jail. When I look at the Alpha Bank conspiracy, we now know that the CIA looked at the data that they had and it was made up. They just made it up. One of the things I'd like to ask you, I'm sure you have other things to say, is the stunning level of incompetence we see in these people in trying to create this conspiracy. And I think how it reflects that these people got in office. And if you look at a Kamala Harris, for instance, that it reflects a group of technocrats that are wholly unable to deal with anything other than creating narratives and struggling to hold on to these absurd narratives. Alexander Mercouris.
I think this is absolutely correct. Now, can I just say, I mean, going back to your earlier point, I mean, these people may be incompetent, they may be corrupt, they may be all kinds of things, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily stupid. And I think it's always something we need to always understand. You can be very, very clever in some ways, and you can still be incompetent. And if you're working in an atmosphere of intrigue and, you know, wire pulling and corruption and narrative creation, however clever you are, that tends to pull you towards becoming incompetent, because you're no longer dealing with realities. You are dealing with, shall we say, manufactured narratives, which is a completely different thing. And I've seen that happen. I mean, like yourself, I've worked in public institutions in Britain. I've worked in private ones, and I can see what happens when people get swept along with narratives and that they lose track of realities and they start to do incredibly foolish and extraordinary things. But just before we finish, or rather just to bookend a point about Russiagate and following on from a point that Ray said, Ray has talked a lot about the hack, the DNC hack, which is for many people the starting point of Russiagate. We now know that it wasn't, but for many people it was. And VIPs, the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, have been consistently saying there isn't any proof there was a hack. They've been skeptical that there was a hack. For a long time, I said to themselves, well, I hear what they're saying, you know, VIPs, possibly, you know, I'm not, you know, maybe there was something going on. Maybe somebody did extract something from the DNC computers. Well, I have to say, I'm sure you have it in the United States too, but in Britain, we have this concept of the fruit from the poisoned tree. If the entire tree is poisonous, and you're talking about the Alpha thing, you do all these other things that were going, the Steele dossier, all of that, and you remember it's the same people who are constructing all of this. The story of the hack is just another fruit of that poisoned tree. So I've come round completely to Ray's view. I no longer take seriously the claim of a hack. There's plenty of evidence already accumulating reasons to doubt that there ever was a hack. And I'm afraid there's too much now about the rest of Russiagate, which shows that it which didn't make sense, which wasn't true, for me to believe in it any longer. That's what I wanted to say, just as a bookend. But, you know, if you live in an atmosphere of corruption, if you live in an atmosphere of deceit, you're not going to make realistic decisions. You're going to be frightened because people who live in that kind of world are always afraid that's going to affect your decisions, and that's going to demoralize you in all kinds of ways. And you're going to start making dangerous and reckless decisions based upon your own political self-preservation. And of course, if you're committing things that are contrary to the law, you're always worried about being found out and called to account. So I think that this is the product, the incompetence that you're talking about is the inevitable product of a deeply dysfunctional system, and something that people in the United States need to understand and need to start to address.
I also think that maybe what I'm describing is as incompetence is the manifestation of hubris.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you know, I could write anything. Christopher Steele probably felt I could hand them a blank document and just say Trump's a Russian bot, and they would look at the blank document and say that's proof. So when you know anything that you hand them will be accepted in investigating, why put any effort? What difference does it make? So I think part of that becomes hubris. The one last thing I'd like to ask you before we go, and I've got to add this in, and that is Ukraine, and that is one of the interesting things that happened. And again, the FBI is it is an American, it is a federal law enforcement agency. After the Maidan coup, one of the things that happened was Comey goes to Ukraine and opens NABU, an anti-corruption bureau, which oddly enough could never find any corruption involving Hunter Biden or anything like that. Apparently they weren't very good. But oddly enough, an organization, a law enforcement agency tasked, and I worked with them, with looking into things like bank robberies, terrorism, kidnappings, crimes that cross state lines, strictly in America, decides they have to go to Ukraine and open an anti-corruption bureau in Ukraine. And interestingly, one of the things that came out of that anti-corruption bureau was something called a black ledger, an allegation that Paul Manafort, who at the time was Donald Trump's campaign manager, an allegation came that he'd received illegal money in Ukraine. And he had to step down, and it later came out that the infamous Black Ledger was a fraud. But the one thing that I know of that came out of that anti-corruption bureau was part of Russiagate. But everything seems to go back to Ukraine, and it seems to me that part of it was part of the whole "we have to stop Donald Trump" was we don't want somebody to come in and start looking at what we're doing in Ukraine, the money that is changing hands in Ukraine, the corruption that's being filtered through Ukraine, that was part of the fear. It wasn't just that Donald Trump was going to seek rapprochement with Russia. It was that they had a lot of skeletons in their closet in Ukraine. Your thoughts, Alexander?
I think it's entirely correct. And in fact, I think the evidence for that, I mean, it's there. It's building, and I think if anybody took a real attempt to investigate it properly, we'd discover a whole lot more. I mean, lots of things were going on in Ukraine. Are probably still going on in Ukraine. Are probably getting worse in Ukraine because, of course, a war provides ample opportunities to do even more things of that nature. And of course, it's not something that we want the investigative agencies of the United States looking into impartially and objectively as applies to us. So how do we control it over there? Well, we set up their own anti-corruption agency for them and run it for them, because essentially that's what we're doing. I mean, we may not be, but we're giving our advice. And of course, if it's Ukraine, advice that they're getting from the US is advice which they're always going to follow. So I mean, it's a terrible nexus. And actually, I happen to agree. I think Ukraine, as much as Hillary's own personal political needs, is at the bottom of the Russiagate story. They were terrified that there would be a rapprochement between Russia and the US as a result of Trump winning the election. They were terrified that that would mean that the focus on Ukraine would change from one of unstinting support to one of actual scrutiny. They were determined to prevent any of that happening. And of course, we got Russiagate, and that poisoned our relationship with Russia. And it created, I suspect, even more insecurities. And my own personal belief, it's only a belief, my own personal view is that that was a major contributory factor in the fact that there is now a war. I think that the one inexorably led to another, even though we don't have all the pieces, all the links in the chain, which would show that that was the case. That's my own personal view, and I'm confident of it.
Yeah, I think you are quite correct. Alexander, let everyone know about your channel, what you guys do, what you're up to, and where the various platforms that you guys are involved.
Yeah, well, we're on the Duran, which is, of course, you can find us on YouTube as the Duran. I have my own channel, which is Alexander Mercouris, so sorry, which is on YouTube as well. My friend and colleague Alex Christoforou has his own channel. So you can, if you type that name in, you can find it. But you don't get that, go to the Duran, Duran, and that will tell you where you can find us there. And of course, if you put all those names into Rumble, into Locals, into Telegram, into all of these other places, you will find our platform and our channels there as well. And if you go to Locals, to our Locals homepage, or to Rumble, you will find that all our videos are there concentrated in one place. And we are a video. We do videos now, and we primarily do geopolitical analysis, though we do touch on domestic politics in some countries, Britain, where I live, the United States, of course, and also we look at the world in general. And of course, at the moment, we are very absorbed covering the war in Ukraine.
I did have a question about Locals, since we're here, and since we've got almost 1,000 people right now. Locals, I don't know much about it. I've thought about getting involved. I've heard positive things about it, and I hear you talk about your Locals channel. What is different about Locals? What do we need to know about it?
Right. The key thing to understand about Locals is if you go to Locals, you can work on it at 3 levels. You can just go there, look up our Locals page, watch our videos, and of course we also do programs which are exclusive to Locals. So it can be just another variant, if you like, of a platform. But you can also subscribe. You can take out a subscription. It's not an advertising-based platform. It's a subscription-based platform. Now, you don't have to subscribe to see the content, but if you do take a subscription, you can then publish your own content or your own exclusive content. You can actually put in your own content. You can also, at that point, start to participate more actively in what we publish. So you can start putting comments on the threads of whatever you see there. And by the way, I should say, I don't always agree with everything that people publish on Locals on our homepage, but I mean, but you can put all kinds of comments there. And of course, I do live streams on Locals every Wednesday, though actually not Wednesday next week because I'm on leave, but usually on Wednesday, I do live streams at 1400 hours EST. And of course, you can then directly participate in my live streams. And, they're pretty open. I cover pretty much any topical matter, and you can get my views and also respond to and participate in the discussion that's taking place on the live stream. But it is, as I say, it works on subscriptions, but of course you don't have to take out a subscription to keep an eye on what goes on there.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that. Alexander Mercouris, there are a few channels, and yours is at the top of my list, that I check my phone several times a day to see if there is a new video up from you or from the Duran, and as soon as it's up, I'm watching it. So thank you very much. Certainly appreciate
can I just say the same from me about yours? And I would advise, I recommend, for people who want to get an overview of things and to get some extraordinarily high quality commentary, go to your channel, go to your channel, absolutely. So my recommendation of yours as well. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your Saturday morning. Or Saturday afternoon in Europe. Talk to you soon. Bye. Well, that's Alexander Mercouris. Let me finish it off by thanking everybody. Look, I do want you to go to Rokfin. You never know. I'm putting no. I will. But bottom line is this: you can go to rokfin.com/Garland Nixon. That's ROKFIN.com/Garland Nixon. The great thing about Rokfin, I am demonetized. I am literally demonetized because of the type of videos that we're doing now. Because I could make it soft and I could stay away from the hard things, and I could still be monetized and bring in, with the guest I'm having, bring in a ton of money. But I'm going to keep the channel going on my own pocket, and whatever I can, my website and all, whatever I can get from people I see in Rokfin, we're getting some tips. The great thing about Rokfin is it allows you to do a tip jar, and I'm completely demonetized on YouTube right now. I would appreciate those who can go to patreon.com/Garland Nixon. If it's $1, $3, $5, or $100 a month, whatever you can do. I've got a PayPal. You can see it. My email address is garlandin@gmail.com. Again, rokfin.com/Garland Nixon. I am on Facebook. Which just under Garland Nixon, and Instagram, Garland.Nixon, which I'm never on Instagram, at Garland Nixon on Twitter. And of course, again, Rokfin, Rokfin.com/Garland Nixon. Everybody follow me on Rokfin, because they've demonetized me now and on YouTube. So who knows what's coming next? Let's hope for the best and keep our fingers crossed. Rokfin, don't forget that. Let me see what if we got a few questions, a few things. Durham fully exonerates Sussman, Comey, Mueller, and Hillary by proving to the jury that Russian collusion was not a hoax. Interesting comment. Very funny. What do we got here? William Moth and Dungeons were supposed to be for eyes wide shut, decadence entertainment. I'm sure that's in the middle of something I missed. Garland Nixon is a wealth of information. Please consider Rokfin. Was it Hulk Hogan that once referred to one of his adversaries as a fountain of misinformation? At Mo Freedom, U.S. media is compromised of for-profit corporations. Both political parties are corporations as well, and nearly every representative is only representing corporations. Yeah, let's see, what's this? Why can't I see the button to send super chats? You can't, because I have been demonetized. I got a notification when I went in to check my monetization, and they said, well, people talking exploiting Ukraine will be demonetized. So I guess talking about Ukraine in a way that goes against the deep state narrative that the neocons are right and everybody else is wrong, that's going to cost you dearly. And so I am currently demonetized. That's why I ask people to go to rokfin.com/Garland Nixon. I'm not demonetized, nor will I ever be demonetized there. I'm going to do, please, you can join my Rokfin. You can subscribe. There's no cost for my Rokfin channel, but you can also become a member. That's $9.99 a month. That will allow you to see my premium stuff, and including my stuff on, COVID and some other things. That's under premium. But for the $9.99 a month, you can be a member of my channel, see my premium stuff. But you can see premium stuff on any channel for the $9.99. It makes you a member of Rokfin, period. And any of the creators, you can see their premium stuff. So that's a good idea for $9.99 a month. Again, there's no advertisements, and it's a subscription base, but you don't have to pay. Look, if you can't afford the $9.99 a month, I understand. Just enjoy the video and just subscribe over in Rokfin. If you can help out with the $9.99 a month and be a subscriber of Rokfin, I certainly, and become a member, I certainly appreciate that. So do what you can afford. Anything else? Weapons. Corporate media incentives are clear when you look at their stock portfolios. 1979, God, I feel old. Yeah, 1979 was a good year. A lot of good wine, lots of rain, had a snowstorm. How's that? Heading to Rokfin right now. Thank you, everyone. And just so I can do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Rokfin in our, there we go. So I just put in our comments, I just put the Rokfin stream data, so that if you want to check out the Rokfin stream, you can just click on that. Before we go, let's do this. Names, as Caleb Maupin always says, names and locations, names and locations. Put where you are from. What city are you in? What country are you in? I'm going to read some of those out, and I'm going to start looking. Nothing yet, but I want to see. Where are we from? Mischievous, bored with those Lockheed Martin positions and Longhorn Magical at one point. All right, now let's start seeing. Somebody's going to put where they're from. Helsinki, Finland. Look at that. Helsinki. We've got someone from Helsinki. We got going south from Greenland. We've got Essen Derek from Turkey. We've got Kamala V from British Columbia. How about William Martin from Deer Lodge, Montana? Dan is from Phoenix. How about James is from Ottawa. Chicken Patty. Chicken Patty is from Ohio. Anonymous is in Yonkers. Reckless Abandon is Melbourne, Australia. Chicken Beak is in Seattle. Vassal is in Bulgaria. Another name I can't. Reggie Sylvester, Bed-Stuy. Oh man, Empire Boulevard. We've got Buick Adelaide from Greek Australia. We've got Vassal from Sofia, Bulgaria. Jamie Rogers, northeast of Fairbanks, Alaska. Spindley is from Picklin. I don't know where that is. We've got 2001. T. Lex Thelonious is from Japan. Wow. O.L. Griffin's from Tidewater, Virginia. Know that area well. Got relatives down there. Jenny Lynn, Cincinnati. Going south is sorry for all the melt. Sea level rise, guys. How about that? We've got someone from Argentina. That's Xanadu Tyson. My gosh. We've got T. Terry, North Alabama. William Allen, Phoenix, New York, the other Phoenix. Mischievous, descendant of George Washington in Washington State. Diamond Hands is in PG County. Stalin is in North Dakota. Well, that's it. I want to thank everybody. Don't forget Rokfin. Go over there if you Rokfin.com, and if you can, if you can't do a super chat here, you can do a tip on Rokfin. And let me say this for anybody who's watching this at a later date. One of the things I like about Rokfin, now that I've been demonetized, I do need people to join my patreon.com page. I do need people to do those who can PayPal. You can see garlandin@gmail.com. But also on Rokfin, anytime you watch it, even if you're watching this 2 weeks later, if you watch the Rokfin show, in the tip jar, you can tip $2, $5, $10, $15, whatever you want. So if you're watching this at a later date and you're like, well, I'd like to do a super chat, but I can't, go over to rokfin.com/Garland Nixon, and you can bring up the video, start watching the video, and boom, you can tip it at any time. So thanks a lot. I appreciate everybody who keeps the channel going. Appreciate all my regulars, Chicken Patty and Coop W and Camilla V and everybody. I will be on tonight at some point. I'm going to probably do a premium video on rokfin.com. Thank you very much again. Oh, wow. Connie's Kishat is in, what is that? Connie Kishat is in Israel. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Peace. I'm out.